continue talking about animation and CSS. And in this example, I'd like to create a rotating card that has a front and a back. In the previous example, we created a card that flips or spins on the y-axis, but now you can see I've got the back and the front side. So the card kind of shows two different sides, okay? So let's recreate that, right? Let me delete all this and then we'll write it all from scratch, okay? So my markup here includes a div with class box, and then it has two inner elements, front and back. So if I start, it just looks like this, right? And let's give the box some styles. So we'll give it a width of 100 pixels. And these numbers could be anything, right? I'm going to do a height of 100 pixels, background color. Let's actually give it some margin too to push it away from the edges, right? So we'll do 2 rems, and then we'll do background color of tomato, our favorite color. And what else do we need here? I think that's actually pretty good. Yeah, there we go, right? So now let's set up an animation. So I'm going to start with, at keyframes, and I'll give it the keyframe, the identifier spin, and we'll set the starting animation to 0. And at 0, we're going to transform and rotate on the y-axis, right? So we'll say beginning rotation is 0, and at 100% along the animation, we'll do transform on the y, but we'll do 360 degrees. Okay, so I've got my keyframe set up, and now I need to apply the animation to this element, right? So I'll say animation is, actually let's do animation name is spin, and animation duration is 4,000 milliseconds, right? That should be 4 seconds. And yeah, animation iteration count of infinite, right? So you can see I've got the thing spinning. It doesn't have any perspective, and then the animation kind of eases in and eases out. So let's fix the perspective first. So we need to add some perspective. So I'll say perspective will be, let's say, 400 pixels. We can just copy that and use it down here, right? And for the animation, let's set it to animation timing function of linear, right? So that should just be a constant change, and we should just have an even, smooth rotation now. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now let's handle the front and the back side. So both of those will basically look the same. So I'll just set up a selector that looks like this. We'll say box child div. So any children that are divs will get the style. So that applies to both of these, right? So so we'll say width of 80 pixels, height of 80 pixels, and border radius. I'm going to make them round, right? So we'll say border radius of 50%. And let's give them a background color. So let's do background color. I use this like wheat color here, so we'll use that again. And so that doesn't look too bad, but now I want to position them in the middle, right? So I'm going to give the box up here a position of relative, and then both of the divs, the child divs, will say position absolute. Okay, so those guys will be positioned absolute, and then we can put them both in the same spot, right? Because they're going to actually be one on top of the other, but when they flip over, we're only going to see one, and then when it flips, we'll see the other one, and we'll talk about how that's going to work. So I'm going to say left of 10 pixels, top of 10 pixels, right? So if these guys are 80 and the container is 100, that leaves me 20 pixels left over. So if I move over 10 on the left and the top, that should put me in the middle, right? Oh, there we go. And now let's move the text into the center of the circle, right? So we'll set this to text align center and a line height of 80 pixels, right? So if the line height's the height of the box, it should put the text in the center, right? So that's pretty good. Okay, so now let's talk about getting them to flip over, right? So what I want to do is I want to take the back box, the second one, like right now that's the only one we see, and we see that first because normally the computer is going to stack front to back. It's going to stack elements that come later in front of elements that come before. So the back div is going to stack on top of the front div, okay? Because it comes later in the list here, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over 180 degrees, right, on the y-axis. So let's say box child div, and then what I want to get is I want to get the last child, and that should be the back circle, right? The back box, right? The back div. And what I'll do is I'll say transform rotate Y of 180 degrees. Okay? So that should flip that one over. Now if you look, it should be flipped over, but I'm still seeing it. So actually, like if I did this, if I get rid of the animation name here, you can see back is backwards, right? Because I flipped it 180 degrees. So what we're doing is we're seeing the back side of back, right? You know, so what I want to do is when it's showing the back side, I don't want to see it, but when I see the front side, I want to see it, right? And it's kind of weird, but they give us this special property for this called backface visible. Okay, so I'm going to go here to box child div because we want this on both the back and the front, right? So we want the back side not to be visible on either of these, right? And only see the front. And since the one of them is rotated 180 degrees, when the whole thing flips over, we'll see this one, and when it flips back to the front, we'll see the other one because this one won't be visible. We'll be looking at the back side. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say backface visibility is hidden. Okay. Okay, so that's there. Now we're going to do one more thing, okay? Since we transformed the child object on the Y, what we need to do is we need to tell the parent element that's also transforming in 3D, we need to tell it to preserve the 3D transformations that happen inside, you know, in its children. Okay, so this is kind of weird, but what we got to do is we got to do transform style is preserve 3D. So it says flattening is not performed, so children maintain their position in 3D space, right? So if we don't have this and we 3D transform a parent element, it loses, or it gets, the elements inside get flattened onto it before they get rotated, right? So what I want to do is I want to preserve their 3D transformation. So I'm going to choose preserve 3D, right? And then I'll run it, and it's still not quite working. Back is still there, and I'm still seeing the back side of it. If you watch at the very beginning, it's flipped over, right? It's reversed, right? So I am seeing the back side, right? And it is flipped over. And that's because this backface visibility doesn't work on WebKit. And I'm running this in Safari right now. So in order for me to cover Safari with this, I need to include WebKit, what is it? WebKit backface visible hidden, right? And this should cover it for other browsers like Firefox and Chrome. Actually, I don't know what the state is on Chrome, but Chrome used to be WebKit. Now I think they're not anymore. I don't remember. Anyway, oh wait, there we go. Now I got the back and I got the front. Okay, so I know that's a little weird, but this property apparently doesn't work on Safari, so we got to include this one to cover Safari. Okay, I didn't test this with like, you know, Opera and all the other browsers, so you may have to, they may have their own you know, settings for that, right? But I think this one covers most of the browsers, and then this is for Safari. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And you know, you could apply this also with a transform, right? So if you did, or a transition. So if we did a transition on box, then you could hover over it and have it flip, and that would be kind of a fun animation too. I'll leave that one for you to try on your own. Maybe I'll do that in the next video. But anyway, thanks for watching.